At 12:51 in the afternoon on Monday, July 27th, Cook County Emergency Management logged a report from the 2300 block of West 167th Street in Markham, Illinois. The wording was clinical: concentrated tree and structural damage within likely tornado path. 1 minute earlier, at 12:50, the Illinois Department of Transportation had closed Interstate 80 near Kedzie Avenue because power lines were down across the roadway. And in that same minute, somebody in Markham was photographing what was left of a row of industrial buildings along 167th Street near Western Avenue, where the roofs had been removed, not damaged, removed. There were men working in that corridor when it happened. Crews at a container yard operating equipment, doing a normal Monday shift in the kind of heat that makes you move slow. One of them was up in a crane when the sky went dark. He watched a loaded shipping container tip over, climb down, and had to fight the wind to get a door open before he could get inside a building. He made it in. Then the roof came off over his head. He walked out of that. A lot of people in southern Cook County walked out of Monday, July 27th. And the reason they did is a story about what actually kills people in a Midwest severe weather event, and about how badly most of us misjudge it. I'm Walter. This channel takes no sponsorships, no brand deals, and no affiliate money, which means nobody pays me to tell you anything except what the data says. And what the data says about July 27th is not what the headlines said. Let me start with the air, because the air on Monday morning was the whole story. Northeast Illinois woke up under a heat index between 100 and 116 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 38 to 47 Celsius. That's the number that combines actual temperature with humidity to describe what the air does to a human body. But the more important measurement that morning was the dew point. And dew point is one of those terms that gets said on television constantly and explained almost never. Here's what it means. The dew point is the temperature you'd have to cool the air down to before water starts condensing out of it. A high dew point means the air is loaded with water vapor. Water vapor is fuel. When it condenses inside a growing thunderstorm, it releases heat. And that heat makes the storm's updraft rise faster and harder. Dew points across Northeast Illinois on Monday morning were in the upper 70s to near 80 degrees Fahrenheit, around 25 to 27 Celsius. That is Gulf Coast air sitting over Chicago. That is about as much fuel as the atmosphere over Illinois is capable of holding. Meteorologists put a number on that fuel. It's called CAPE, and the letters stand for Convective Available Potential Energy. Think of it as a measurement of how much upward push is stored in the atmosphere, waiting for something to trigger it. On a garden variety summer storm day in Illinois, you might see 1,000, maybe 2,000 of the units they use. On Monday, the most unstable air over the region was measured near 6,000. That alone gives you strong thunderstorms. It does not, by itself, give you tornadoes. For tornadoes, you need the second ingredient, and Monday had that too. Wind shear is the change in wind speed and direction as you go up through the atmosphere. If the wind at the ground is coming out of the southeast at 15 miles an hour, and the wind 10,000 feet up is coming out of the southwest at 50, you've got a horizontal rolling motion in the air, like a pencil rolling across a desk. A strong updraft can tilt that rolling tube upright and start the whole storm rotating. That is a supercell, a thunderstorm with a rotating updraft. And there's a combined index forecasters use to describe how favorable the environment is for them. It was running near 20 over northern Illinois Monday morning. Values above 1 are considered supportive. 20 is a signal you take seriously. The trigger came in the late morning from a subtle disturbance in the atmosphere moving east and a narrow line where surface winds were coming together. That was enough. Storms went up in eastern Wisconsin and northeast Illinois, and in the extreme fuel available to them, some of them became severe within minutes. Then they tracked southeast, straight into the third largest metropolitan area in the United States. Here is what the National Weather Service confirmed, and I'm going through all 7 because the pattern matters more than any single one. At 11:55 in the morning, an EF-0 touched down just south of Wheaton College in DuPage County. Peak winds 75 miles an hour, about 120 kilometers an hour. On the ground, 2 minutes or less. Path width, 100 yards. At the same minute, 11:55, a second EF-0 hit Glen Ellen. Also 75 mile an hour peak winds. 1 mile long, 100 yards wide. At 12:09, Downers Grove. EF-0, peak winds 85 miles an hour, about 137 kilometers an hour. Path length 2.1 miles, roughly 3.4 kilometers. At 12:28, an EF-0 crossed just southeast of Romeoville in Will County. Peak winds 80 miles an hour. Path 2.5 miles, about 4 kilometers, 110 yards wide. It damaged fencing at the Lewis University baseball field. At 12:34, Orland Park in Cook County. EF-0, peak winds 85 miles an hour. Path 2.9 miles and a maximum width of 250 yards, which made it the widest of the weak ones. At 12:47, the first EF-1. It began near Country Club Hills and tracked 11.4 miles, roughly 18 kilometers, with peak winds of 110 miles an hour, about 177 kilometers an hour, and a peak width of 200 yards. It moved through Hazel Crest, Markham, Harvey, East Hazel Crest, and Homewood. That is the one that took the roofs off West 167th Street. That is the one that put roofing material off multiple apartment buildings near 171st Street and Kedzie Avenue in Hazel Crest. And at 12:58, the second EF-1. It started east of Glenwood and ran 3.7 miles through Linwood and Lansing before crossing into Munster, Indiana. Peak winds also 110 miles an hour. Peak width 225 yards. In Lansing, a spotter reported a home structurally collapsed and several roofs missing. First confirmed touchdown, 11:55. Last confirmed touchdown, 12:58. 63 minutes. 7 tornadoes across a metropolitan area of more than 9 million people. Now, one thing about those ratings, because it gets misunderstood constantly. The enhanced Fujita scale is not a measurement of wind. Nobody puts an anemometer inside a tornado. The rating is assigned backwards from the damage. Survey teams look at what broke and how it broke, compare it against a catalog of structures and how much wind it takes to damage each one, and estimate the peak wind from there. Which means a tornado crossing an empty field gets rated low, or gets no rating at all. Not because it was weak, but because there was nothing there to tell us how strong it was. An EF-0 through a soybean field and an EF-0 through a subdivision are not the same storm. They're the same rating. So 7 tornadoes, 2 of them EF-1 at 110 miles an hour, across the Chicago metro in about an hour. That's the headline. That's the number that traveled. And it is not the story. Here is what the National Weather Service in Chicago wrote in their own event summary, and I want you to sit with this sentence. The majority of the damage that occurred in and near the Chicago metropolitan area was caused by strong to destructive straight-line winds, not the tornadoes, the wind. Across portions of southern Cook and eastern Will counties, the Weather Service estimated gusts of 80 to 105 miles an hour, roughly 129 to 169 kilometers an hour. That corridor included Tinley Park, Oak Forest, Homewood, Chicago Heights, Ford Heights, Sauk Village, Stager, Crete, Monee, University Park, Madison, Frankfort, and Beecher. Read the top of that range again, 105 miles an hour. The two EF-1 tornadoes peaked at 110, and at 1:05 in the afternoon, an instrument at Bult Field near Monee, Illinois, measured a gust of 104 miles an hour, about 167 kilometers an hour. Measured, not estimated from damage, an actual recorded number. The Weather Service called that one of the strongest wind gusts ever measured in the state of Illinois, and then did something I want to give them credit for. They immediately noted that there is no official list of the strongest gusts in Illinois history, and they laid out the contenders. 107 miles an hour at Moline in March of 2006. 105 in Marshall County in July of 2024. 104 at Pecatonica in July of 2003. 104 at Scott Air Force Base in June of 2003. And they added that there are several reports from before the year 2000 of gusts above 115 miles an hour that are difficult to verify. That's how you handle a record claim honestly. State it, then state what you don't know about it. So what is a straight-line wind, and why does it hit that hard? Inside a thunderstorm, rain and hail fall and drag air down with them. As that air descends, it hits drier air. Some of the precipitation evaporates, and evaporation cools the air. Cold air is heavier, so it accelerates downward, hits the ground, and has nowhere to go but outward, fanning out in all directions at speed. That's a downburst. When storms organize into a line, those downbursts can merge into a continuous shelf of wind, pushing forward across a wide front. A tornado is a narrow, rotating column. It hits a 200-yard wide strip and misses everything on either side. A straight-line wind event hits everything for miles, all at once. Look at what that did across the south suburbs. At Ford Heights, 11 semi-trailers flipped over at a shipping facility near Joe Orr Road and State Street. Near 191st Street and 76th Avenue, a sports dome collapsed. South of Frankfort, an industrial building came down and a semi-truck rolled, with radar showing winds near 80 knots a few hundred feet above the ground at that spot. In Madison, a large section of roof was torn off a house in the Cricket Hill subdivision. In Stager, 7 houses took significant damage and half the town lost power. In Crete, the entire town lost power. In Beecher, structures collapsed and 2 people were injured, which is the only injury figure in the Weather Service report and the reason I keep saying it out loud. 2 injuries across all of that. On a Monday afternoon in a metro area of 9 million people. That number is not luck. And this is the part of the story I actually want you to take with you. The Weather Service in Chicago saw this coming. They recognized the potential for both tornadoes and destructive straight-line winds, and they issued severe thunderstorm warnings that said so in language they almost never use. At 12:49 in the afternoon, they issued a warning for portions of southern Cook and eastern Will counties, calling for wind gusts up to 90 miles an hour, then upgraded it mid-event to call for 100. At 1:08, a second one for Will, Kankakee, and Lake counties, opening at 100 miles an hour. Here's the context that makes that remarkable. The Weather Service began attaching formal wind speed tags to severe thunderstorm warnings in 2010. In the 15 years since, the Chicago office had issued a warning tagged for 100-mile-an-hour winds exactly 3 times. Once in June of 2011, once again later that June, once in July of 2012. Monday was the 4th and 5th, and the 104-mile-an-hour gust at Bult Field verified the language. They said 100. The atmosphere delivered 104. Now, why does that matter to you, specifically wherever you are? Because a severe thunderstorm warning does not sound like an emergency. Most people have heard hundreds of them. They mean a storm capable of 58-mile-an-hour winds or 1-inch hail, and most of the time you get some branches down and a loud 20 minutes. But when a severe thunderstorm warning carries a destructive tag, it means the office issuing it expects wind at or above 80 miles an hour. That tag triggers a wireless emergency alert on your phone, the same buzzing alert a tornado warning sends. And it is telling you that the wind coming at you will do tornado-grade damage across an area far wider than any tornado. If your phone goes off with that alert, you take the same action you would take for a tornado warning. Not a version of it, the same action. And I want to tell you why the Chicago office warns the way it does. Because there's a reason, and it's a specific one. On the afternoon of August 28, 1990, a supercell moved through Kendall and Will counties on the southwest edge of the Chicago metro. Between 3:15 and 3:45 in the afternoon, it produced an F5 tornado. It tracked 16.4 miles, roughly 26 kilometers, at times up to a half-mile wide through Oswego, Plainfield, Crest Hill, and Joliet. 29 people were killed. Around 350 were injured. 470 homes were destroyed and 1,000 more damaged, along with 2 schools and a church. It remains the only F5 ever recorded in Illinois and the strongest August tornado ever recorded in the United States. And here is the part that matters for this story. It hit without a tornado warning. The Weather Service's own service assessment, published the following May, documents that. The tornado was wrapped in rain and low cloud, invisible from the ground until it was on top of people, and the technology and the warning process of 1990 did not catch it in time to get an alert out. Students and staff were inside Plainfield High School when it hit. There was no siren, no bulletin, no 90 seconds. That failure changed things. In the years that followed, Doppler radar came to northern Illinois, and today, the Weather Service's Chicago Forecast Office and the radar that watches this metro both sit at Lewis University Airport in Romeoville, Illinois, which is worth pausing on, because at 12:28 in the afternoon on Monday, July 27th, one of the 7 tornadoes crossed just southeast of Romeoville and damaged fencing at the Lewis University baseball field. It went past the front door of the operation that sits there because of 1990. And that operation was, at that exact moment, pushing out warnings that named 100-mile-an-hour winds to a metro area of 9 million people. 36 years apart, same corner of the same metro. One event with 29 dead and no warning. One event with 2 injuries and a warning that arrived before the wind did. That's not a coincidence, and it's not luck. That's a warning system that got rebuilt after it failed and then worked. But a warning only works if the person receiving it acts on it. Every part of that chain, the radar, the forecaster, the alert on your phone, delivers you to one moment where you decide whether to move. Monday in the south suburbs, a lot of people moved. So let's talk about what that action is, because this is the part that actually keeps you alive. Lowest floor of a sturdy building, interior room. Put as many walls between you and the outside as you can. Away from windows, because in a 100-mile-an-hour wind, the glass is the first thing to fail, and it fails inward at speed. If you're in an apartment, and I'm thinking about those buildings near 171st and Kedzie in Hazelcrest that lost roofing material, the upper floor is the wrong place to be. Get to a ground floor interior space if a neighbor or a common area gives you one. An interior hallway, a stairwell, a bathroom with no exterior wall. If you're in a mobile or manufactured home, you leave. Not when it starts, before. A mobile home is not survivable shelter in 100-mile-an-hour wind, and it does not become survivable because you're in the bathroom. Know now, today, where the nearest permanent structure is and how long it takes you to get there. And then there's the vehicle question, because this is where the Markham footage matters. There were destroyed cars in that parking lot on 167th Street. Windows blown out, panels caved. And the temptation, when you're driving and the sky turns, is to think of your car as shelter. It has a roof. It has walls. It's yours. It is the worst option available to you. A vehicle in a 100-mile-an-hour wind is a light box on a slick surface. It can be lifted, rolled, or pushed sideways off the road. And everything the wind is already carrying, roofing panels, tree limbs, sheet metal, comes through the glass. And in a car you cannot see well, you cannot hear a warning over the roar, and you can drive into a flooded underpass because you're watching the wind and not the water. If you're driving and a destructive warning hits, the goal is to get out of the vehicle and into a building, a gas station, a store, anywhere with a solid interior. If there is genuinely no building, get away from the vehicle and lie flat in the lowest ground you can find, covering your head. That advice sounds unpleasant because it is. It's still better than the car. Now, the wind was not the only thing happening Monday, and the other hazards killed a lot of people in this country last year, so I'm not skipping them. The same moisture that fueled those storms produced torrential rain. A station near Bridgeview measured 3.95 inches, about 10 centimeters. A private station on Chicago's southwest side recorded 3.93 inches and noted that most of it fell in under an hour and a half. That's flash flood arithmetic. Standing water was reported on I-57 near 167th Street, and a foot of moving water near 74th and Roberts Road in Bridgeview. 6 inches of moving water will take you off your feet. 12 will float most passenger cars. When you can't see pavement, you don't know if there's pavement. Turn around. The hail was extraordinary too. 3 inches in diameter near Shorewood, which is a stone the size of a teacup falling at highway speed. 2.5 inches near Woodland in Iroquois County. And now I want to talk about the hazard that arrives after the storm leaves, because it is the one that gets people killed in the days that follow, and almost nobody covers it. Go back to the heat index on Monday. Between 100 and 116 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 38 to 47 Celsius across parts of northern and central Illinois. Now put that together with the power reports. The entire town of Crete lost power. Half of Stager was out. Markham Village Hall closed for lack of power, as did a courthouse in Bridgeview. A fire station in Country Club Hills lost power. Across the state line and to the north, tens of thousands were out in the Fox Valley. That is a heat emergency with the air conditioning switched off, and it does not end when the wind stops. It runs as long as restoration takes, which in a hard-hit grid is days. If that's you, after any severe storm in summer heat, here is what matters. Get to cooling. Not later, right away. A cooling center, a public library, a relative's house on a circuit that stayed up, a shopping center. Municipalities open cooling centers after outages, and they are almost always underused because people assume they'll manage. Heat illness builds quietly, and by the time it's obvious, it's an emergency. Check on anybody nearby who is older, who lives alone, or who depends on electricity for medical equipment. Oxygen concentrators, CPAP machines, powered wheelchairs, refrigerated medication. That is a phone call or a knock on a door, and it costs you nothing. If you run a generator, it goes outside. Outside, away from windows, doors, and vents. Not in a garage, not in a breezeway, not on a covered porch, not in a doorway with the door cracked open. Carbon monoxide from portable generators kills more people after storms than the storms do, and it kills them while they sleep because the gas has no smell and no color, and the first symptom is confusion. If you have a battery-powered carbon monoxide alarm, this is what it is for. And treat every downed line as live. The reports out of southern Cook County on Monday included power lines across Interstate 80, downed poles in Woodridge, and lines down in Markham, Evanston, and Crown Point. A line lying on the ground can energize a wet fence, a puddle, a guardrail, a chain link run halfway down the block. You don't test it, you don't move it with a branch, and you don't drive over it. You call it in and you stay back. That is the part of a severe weather day that the footage never shows you. And it's the part that runs longest. And there was one more thing, which I include because it's genuinely rare. As the storms moved south along the Lake Michigan shoreline, they shoved the water. River gauges at the Chicago Lock, on the Portage-Burns Waterway, and on the Indiana Harbor Canal recorded water level swings of up to 2.7 feet, about 82 centimeters, over 20 to 40-minute cycles. At Waukegan Harbor, video showed currents strong enough to displace buoys. The Weather Service logged those as a seiche and possible meteotsunami. That's a wave generated by a pressure and wind disturbance crossing the lake. And on the Great Lakes, it can pull people off breakwalls with no warning at all. Monday also wasn't only Illinois, and this is where the day gets its proper scale. At 11:56 in the morning, 1 minute after those first two tornadoes touched down in DuPage County, a tornado developed just north of Wisconsin Avenue in Appleton, Wisconsin. Roughly 190 miles, about 306 kilometers north of Chicago. Same air mass, same hour. It tracked south and it intensified as it went. It moved through Appleton into Fox Crossing and Menasha, cutting across US 10 and Highway 441, where the worst of the damage was concentrated. It dissipated over Lake Winnebago at 12:22 in the afternoon. 26 minutes on the ground, about 12.1 miles, roughly 19 kilometers. The Weather Service office in Green Bay initially rated it EF-2. By Tuesday morning, they had upgraded it to EF-3, with estimated peak winds around 140 miles an hour, about 225 kilometers an hour. One note on width, because you may see two different numbers. Initial coverage of the Green Bay survey gave a maximum width of 1,500 yards. Later reporting on the finalized survey put the widest point at 1,800 yards, just over a mile. I'm giving you both rather than picking the bigger one. The Wisconsin State Climatology Office noted this was the state's fourth EF-3 of 2026, and that Wisconsin had not seen 4 tornadoes rated EF-3 or stronger in a single year since 1984. Governor Evers declared a state of emergency. Tens of thousands lost power. Injury reporting from Appleton and Menasha has been inconsistent, and I'd rather tell you that than give you a number I can't stand behind. Early statements from the Weather Service indicated no injuries or fatalities. Later summaries described dozens of people injured. Menasha's police chief said at a Tuesday briefing that nobody was reported missing and that injuries were relatively few. Those accounts don't line up cleanly, and until the finalized storm data is out, I'm not going to pretend they do. But here is the number from Wisconsin that I want to put directly against the Chicago story. According to preliminary reports from the Green Bay office, the first tornado warning for Appleton and Menasha was issued at 11:59 in the morning. The tornado had touched down at 11:56. The warning came 3 minutes after it was already on the ground. A particularly dangerous situation tornado warning followed shortly after noon. That's the second highest level of tornado warning the Weather Service issues, reserved for exactly what this was. 2 forecast offices, 1 air mass, 1 event where the warning got out ahead of the wind, and 1 where a tornado went from nothing to EF2 strength faster than a warning could be written. That gap is not a failure of anybody at a desk in Green Bay. It's the physical limit of the problem. Some storms give you 20 minutes, and some give you none. And the honest answer is that you cannot know in advance which kind is coming for you, which is the entire argument for having a plan before the sky changes. Which brings me back to 167th Street in Markham. That corridor took an 11.4-mile EF1 with 110-mile-an-hour winds. It stripped roofs off industrial buildings, down the power lines that closed I-80, and wrecked the vehicles in a parking lot where men were working an ordinary shift. And a crane operator with a container tipping over beside him made the correct decision, which was to get out of the equipment and get inside a building. And the building held its walls even after it lost its roof. That's what the whole day comes down to. The buildings mostly held. The trees mostly didn't. The vehicles didn't at all. And the 2 injuries in Beecher stand as the number they do because warnings went out with unusual language and enough people treated a severe thunderstorm warning like the emergency it was. Storm surveys get revised, ratings change, path lengths get extended, and additional tornadoes are sometimes confirmed weeks after an event, as happened here when a 7th was added days later. If the Weather Service updates any of these findings, I'll cover it. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you want that update when it comes. To the line crews who worked through the heat to get power back to towns that lost all of it. To the fire departments that went door to door in Markham and Hazelcrest checking on people. And to the emergency managers in Cook and Will counties who fed the reports that let the Weather Service warn as aggressively as they did, thank you. Keep a way to get warnings that doesn't depend on you being awake. And know where you're going before you need to go there.